Who is the one guy that you cannot pass up on in fantasy football drafts this year? Troy, we've got a lot of great questions coming today, but I want to start with this one that we got in from Ferg, Mr. Showtime 2144. What's been the hardest guy to pass up on because of value, and who's the guy that you wind up drafting everywhere?
I've been drafting a lot of Rashad Bateman, man. I've been drafting a lot of Rashad Bateman. Like, I feel like I'm not trying to. He's just always there in amazing value, right? Because he was clearly brought there to the Ravens to be the wide receiver one on the team. And for me, right, and I think a lot of people are expecting it to be a death sentence for him. Like a lot of people were high on him, and people lowered him down on the ranks because for whatever reason, oh, the Ravens can't pass, or they don't pass, or Lamar can't pass, whatever, right? And they're a running team. So we have to think about who they were throwing the ball to, right? Lamar had Willie Snead, a washed-up Des Bryant, Miles Boykin. So there's a reason why they didn't pass the ball very much. The only person they really had was, Mark Andrews. And before the draft, I was saying, like, they need a big body wide receiver in order to, as a real wide receiver one, right? Because Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown ain't doing it for him. And Rashad Bateman fits the bill. He's extremely talented. Maybe he's not going to be that week one, but by the end of the season, I see him, being that go-to target for Lamar. So, and he's going so late in drafts. Like, if I can get a potential wide receiver one, maybe it doesn't help me immediately, but if I can get him, if he can do his thing by the end of the season, I think he's going as steal right now.
I love that call out. And Rashad Bateman, you know that I'm going with Chris Carson because that's just my guy. But Rashad Bateman was my number 2 guy. And you hit it on the head, man. Like, that was the one thing that has been missing from this offense. And, Kenny Golladay was a free agent. Allen Robinson, before he got franchise tagged, I thought he was going to be out there. Julio Jones was on the trade market. And I was like, all of these guys are exactly what this Baltimore Ravens offense needs. And they didn't get any of those guys, but they got Rashad Bateman. They got Tylan Wallace. They got Sammy Watkins. They went out and got 3 big-bodied receivers, and I think they're trying to do kind of what they did with Cam in his early days in Carolina, just surround him with some big targets that can catch those tough jump balls and really help elevate Lamar Jackson. Now, the guy that I'm going to call out, and I just kind of already gave it away here, but Chris Carson is my guy, man. I mean, this guy is an RB1, and I get it. He's got some injury history, but who doesn't? I mean, that's what running backs do. They're just getting smashed by 300-pound men all day long. Like, every running back gets hurt. And when you look at it on a per game basis, he's actually below average in injuries. Now, I realize some of those have been big injuries that have come at the end of the year and ended his season and really hurt people in playoff spots. But Chris Carson is an absolute dog. And last year, he was having his best year ever as a receiver. So we know he could run the ball. We know he's got a nose for the end zone. And now he's developing as a pass catcher. They locked him in on a 2-year contract, which just shows their commitment to him. Chris Carson is a guy that I am, comfortable taking in the second round as my RB2 without even blinking twice. And you can get him as late as the late 3rd, early 4th in some drafts. So Chris Carson 100% is my guy.
I mean, I love that take, man. I wasn't going to take it from you, but I 100% agree with everything you said.
I appreciate it, man. You stole the Chris Carson love from me last week, so I had to start off the show with it this week. But you probably noticed that Victoria isn't here today. She will be back next week. We got some great reviews with her here last week, and I think that it really elevates the show to a new level. But unfortunately, she couldn't make it. She'll be back next week. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Football Guys Mailbag Show. Just a reminder that you can send all of your questions into mailbag at footballguys.com, which you can see on the top left of your screen right here. We go every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We start off by answering all of these submitted questions that we get through Twitter and email and all that. And then once we are done with that, we will open it up to live questions in the chat. So start dropping those questions in there now because we will get to them at the end of the show. One other thing that I want to call out is that if you are a high-stakes fantasy football player, which if you are paying attention to fantasy football in early July, you probably are, you got to sign up for the Football Guys Players Championship. We're running this through FFPC, and you get a chance to win $500,000 by playing in this. The entry is $350, or you can build 3 teams for $1,000, and you get a chance to play in a league with an absolutely life-changing grand prize. Now, on top of that $500,000 grand prize, there's also $3.7 million total going out. So you can find this league on FFPC and draft your team as soon as possible. Now, we got a lot of questions to get through today, so let's go ahead and dive right in. We've got our guy Taco, who has been sending us questions in every single week. Appreciate the love, Taco. And his question for us today is, if you were to pursue 2 wide receivers out of these 5 in an auction league, who would you pick? Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or Allen Robinson? Pick two, Troy.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Keenan Allen and Justin Jefferson. It was an extremely difficult question, right? And those make the best questions. But the reason why is because another year with Herbert, with Keenan Allen, he's always disrespected, right? So in an auction, you can probably get him for probably cheaper than he should go. And I'm just a huge Keenan Allen fan. He's going to get the targets. Yes, Mike Williams is there, but Keenan Allen is the bona fide wide receiver one on his team. And look, I just don't see how he could finish, top 8. He's that talented. He should be getting that target share. Justin Jefferson, we saw what he did last year, and he's only going to progress, right? He did that his rookie year, his sophomore year. I'm expecting, him to improve. I don't expect a sophomore slump. So I just think he's excellent. He's going to, I think he could be a top 5 receiver this upcoming year. So I'm going to go with those two.
Yeah, I'm saying the same exact thing. This is a tough question, but we're going to agree on this one. Justin Jefferson had a just mind-blowing, rookie season. It was so much fun to see. But what really jumps out to me is that he didn't have a lot of touchdowns. He was 4th in receiving yards, but he was 22nd in touchdowns. And then we saw Adam Thielen, who didn't have the yards, didn't have the targets, didn't have the receptions that Justin Jefferson did, but he had twice as many touchdowns. So you've got to, assume that somehow that is going to even out a little bit next year. I think some of those touchdowns start getting pulled away from an older Adam Thielen and get pushed towards their stud in Justin Jefferson. Another mind-blowing stat that somebody just told me today is that Justin Jefferson didn't have a single touchdown on the road. Every touchdown he had last year came at home in Minnesota. So even though he set the bar as high as you possibly could as a rookie with 1,400 yards, the NFL rookie record, it's crazy to think that there's still room for improvement there. And then Allen Robinson, obviously I'm a Bears fan. I love Allen Robinson. I've been a fan of this guy forever. Whether it's Andy Dalton or Justin Fields starting this year, that is automatically the best quarterback that Allen Robinson has ever played with. I mean, I'd put both of those guys ahead of Blake Bortles, who I think was the standard for the best quarterback up until now. So Allen Robinson, he's seen 150 plus targets in back-to-back years, and he is just an absolute stud. People always treat him like, oh, he's a low-end wide receiver one. Sure, but let's not discount the fact that this guy has potential to be the wide receiver one with a quarterback upgrade this year. So Allen Robinson, Justin Jefferson, those are my guys as well. Now we're going to switch over to another one that we got through on Twitter today. And this is a fun one because, when I'm waiting on tight ends, if I don't get those first 3, I want to wait till the later rounds. And at Sports the World asks, which tight ends are great value picks in the later rounds? Who are you going for there, Troy?
I'm going for Blake Jarwin. I'll say Blake Jarwin first because he's a deeper guy. So last year he got hurt. He didn't even finish the first game. So you see Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was a top, he's a tight end 1 in points per game last year. And to be honest, Dalton Schultz is more of a blocking tight end. Blake Jarwin, he's talented. And I believe that he's healthy now. So I believe that he's going to resume that starting job now, even though Dalton Schultz is still there. So with a healthy Dak, with obviously other receiving options. But to me, Blake Jarwin is somebody you can get late, as well as I like Jonnu Smith. Obviously the Hunter Henry thing, Hunter Henry being in the mix complicates it. We don't know who's going to be the favored target, but I'm just a huge Jonnu fan. When he was in Tennessee, I believe that he could be used in all sorts of ways on the field, out of the backfield, outside, inside. He's just that athletic of a guy, and he could be a huge red zone threat. Tennessee, they use him a lot in the red zone. So I believe that, Bill Belichick, let's say Cam's the starter, even whether it's Cam or Mac Jones, Jonnu's the type of guy where he's just an athletic monster, and you can just use him in a variety of ways. So those are 2 guys. Oh, and Robert Tonyan. I think he's going in a really good place because last season, sorry, I stole your answer, man.
Save some for me, man. I had Johnny and Robert Tonyan written down. Save some for me, Troy. All right, go on. Talk about Robert Tonyan. Let's hear it.
Okay, I won't say too much. After the season that Robert Tonyan had, I believe that, look, it's hard to, make an argument for too many guys over him after the season he had last year. See, I saved so much for you. There you go.
You know what? I'm going to agree with everything you said. I don't even have that much to add. But what I do want to say is Jonnu Smith right now, I'm glad you called him out because he's a guy that I'm really starting to change my take on a little bit. I think initially, he got signed with the Patriots, and I was thrilled. I was like, this is one of the best fits for him. then the very next day they went out and signed Hunter Henry, and that just kind of, soured the taste of a lot. Like a lot of people didn't want anything to do with either of those guys now. But now that the dust has settled a little bit, and I'm thinking about it some more, Jonnu Smith is an efficiency monster. And Bill Belichick, I think he's going to do whatever he can to get the ball in his hands. So you already called it out, like the goal line carries. We saw him get used at the goal line last year. Damian Harris isn't that big of a guy. I know they went out and drafted Ramondre Stevenson, who could be a goal line back. But I completely agree with you. Like, it wouldn't surprise me. What are you supposed to do as a defense if you've got Cam Newton running the option to Jonnu Smith? Like, how do you stop that? So I think that Jonnu Smith could end up taking some of that role. And, he's never really been a volume guy, even when he was in Tennessee. But I think that he could very well see, his most targets ever this year. I was talking to Kyle Yates today, actually, about Jonnu Smith, because I know he loves him some Jonnu Smith. And he said that he's actually got Jonnu projected to lead the team in targets this year. So I think that as we get closer to the season, we're going to see Jonnu Smith start to creep up, because I think people are starting to kind of realize this. But if you can still take advantage of that, immediate knee-jerk reaction to the Hunter Henry signing, Jonnu Smith is a knockout value right now. And then you already hit on Robert Tonyan, but I'm with that as well. I think that his volume is going to go up a little bit. They gave him the bag. They paid him. He's getting paid more this year than he got paid in his previous 3 years combined. So while I expect the touchdown rate to come down a little bit, I think the volume goes up, and I'm with you on Robert Tonyan as well. Now we got our boy, Joey Wright, who is always submitting questions as well. Appreciate the support, Joey. And what he's asking is, who was the last quarterback you are comfortable starting your team with? For the sake of conversation, let's just assume this is the 12-man redraft roster. Who's your latest quarterback you're willing to take?
I will say that the last one I'm comfortable taking, probably Ryan Fitzpatrick. So if it's like a 1 QB league, I'll say like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'll save it there, right? I don't want to go lower than Ryan Fitzpatrick because he has the upside. We've seen Ryan Fitzpatrick have the upside to have QB1 weeks consistently, right? He's a gunslinger. He has probably some of the best weapons he's ever had in his career with Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Gibson out of the backfield. So to me, I'm extremely excited about his potential. So I would say that I don't want to risk going too much farther down than him, right? In a 1 QB league, there's a lot of guys ahead of him, that I would prefer. I am high on Fitzpatrick, but I'll say he's probably my lowest.
I like that. And I want to shout out real quickly before I answer this. I see Rick is in the comments right now asking if there was any Jarwin love on that last question. And yes, we started talking about Blake Jarwin. So sorry you missed the Jarwin love, but it'll be back for a replay as soon as we're done recording this live today. Now, this question, I like it, and I feel like there's kind of two ways you can go with it. Like, you went deep where you're willing to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I like that. But for me personally, I feel like there's kind of this fall off after the top 5, and I want one of those top 5. And I feel like all 5 of these guys that I'm going to name right now have potential to be the QB1. And I feel like you just get such a big advantage. Like, yeah, you can get somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick or Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts that has the potential to break out. But I kind of want that peace of mind. And that list for me is Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott. If I'm going to be in a season-long league, I want one of those guys, and I'm not really willing to wait after that. I feel like if you miss out on those guys, Tom Brady's got some potential. Russ Wilson obviously has potential, but there's just a lot of question marks surrounding those guys. And I'd rather have the guys that are going to have the high floor because of the rushing ability, which every single one of those guys has. And realistically, any of them can finish as the QB1. I don't really care how you even rank those top 5, but I feel like that has to be the top 5 right there. Like, you could put Dak as the number 1. You could put Lamar as the number 1, and I'd be open to any of those arguments, but I feel like you need to get one of those top 5 if you really want to compete. Everybody talks about the advantage that you get from having a premium elite tight end, but I feel like getting that advantage in the quarterback slot is just as, if not more important. So don't be afraid to pay up for one of those top quarterbacks, because when you're getting a 5 to 10 point advantage every single week, it's really, really going to help you out.
I'll do a counterpoint to that, right? So I agree with everything you said, right? I'd much rather have one in the top 5 versus late, but then it's all about opportunity cost, right? So if you're going to go with one of your guys, you're giving up a running back or wide receiver if you're going to go that route, which, trust me, I totally get. And I feel like it depends on the team. It depends how the draft is going, because there have been times where I've drafted a QB early. There's been times I've waited. So it really, really depends on how you want to go and how the rest of your, league mates are drafting. So I completely agree with what you're saying, but I don't know. Again, I normally wouldn't go as late as Fitzpatrick, but if I had to, I would.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And I mean, he's got a high ceiling too. And if that's what you want to do is wait on the late round quarterback, go right ahead. JJ Zacharyson, he wrote the book late round QB. His Twitter handle is late round QB. And I talked to him about this recently, and he said, times have changed. He goes, the quarterback game is different now, and you want to get one of those guys with the rushing upside. So even JJ, who is kind of, hung his hat on drafting a late round QB, is saying that the game has changed a little bit, and he doesn't even really want to do that quite as much anymore. Before we flip to this next question, I just want to remind you to keep dropping those questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the show. But we got a question here from DFS_docket, whose show I was actually on last night. Fantastic host. Definitely check him out. But what he's asking is, with the kicker flex option in hashtag SFB11, how many kickers do you plan on drafting? I'll just paint a picture real quickly for those of you that aren't really in the industry. SFB 11, that is Scott Fishbowl 11. It is a huge tournament among analysts and fans that is run by Scott Fish every single year. He does an absolutely bang-up job at putting this together, and we just started the drafts on Monday, so everybody's in the midst of these drafts right now. And what he does is he puts this fun little twist every single year, and this year, the twist is that there are kickers, but not a kicker slot. You can play kickers in your flex. So, kind of weird here, but I like it. And Troy, how many kickers do you plan on drafting this year?
Before I answer this question, shout out to Linda, my co-host on one of my shows, Fantasy Football Confidential, at Lindellians. She has a spreadsheet for, Scott Fishbowl with all kicker data. So I got shout out to her before I answer this.
I've got it bookmarked.
They got a bookmark too, because I use that as a resource pretty much throughout my draft. So I plan on probably taking 2 kickers. I would say I would take 2 kickers, right? I'm going to wait a long time in the draft before I take them. But, I don't want to take too, there's people in my league that are watching, but I'll say, I'm looking at guys like Koo, Bass, things like that, because the kickers, right? A lot of people are realizing that, like last year in the same scoring, if you factored in the kickers, they outscored a lot of like the running back 3s and wide receiver 3s. Nobody wants to talk about it because, a lot of people don't like kickers, but facts are facts, so they might be advantaged late in drafts. Like instead of drafting, your wide receiver 4 or 5, maybe you grab a kicker, right? Like someone like Koo, we've seen in redraft leagues, like he could provide such an advantage to you. So I think I'm going to get like probably 2.
Yeah, I'm holding off on it right now, and I've seen some people, Cooter Doodle is in my division, and she's already snagged a few kickers, and I get it. Like, you can plug these guys in, and they're going to have a relatively safe floor. For me personally, I wanted to get Koo because that guy is just in a league of his own when it comes to kicking. He plays over half of his games indoors, which gives him a huge advantage as well. But he got snagged pretty early, and I wasn't willing to pay up for him quite that high. So realistically, I mean, when I'm looking at this is a tournament with 1,900 people, and I don't think that you're going to win this tournament by playing it safe. So if you want to plug somebody in your flex that's going to get you, 10 to 12 points, a kicker can definitely do that for you. But I'm chasing the upside here. So in the late rounds, rather than going after kickers that I could plug in my flex, I'm going for rookies and guys that are coming back from injuries and guys that have a lot of upside, because I'm chasing that. I'd rather have a guy that's going to score, 1 point on a given week or 25 points on a given week than somebody that's going to have that smaller volatility in a big league like this. So I love the idea of incorporating kickers in here. I think it's a lot of fun, but realistically, it's something that I'm probably not going to be focusing on too much.
No,
now let's flip over. We got Maddie Daddy 24/7 here, another good friend of yours and I's, Troy, and he's asking, what are the expectations for Kenny Golladay? Are we expecting a bounce back? Well, I think all he needs to do is suit up to bounce back.
I was gonna say
what do you think here, Troy?
I say, yeah, that was going to be my first point, right? All you got to do is show up, and he already has a bounce back year. But I believe that he's being disrespected. There's a reason that they brought him in. There's a reason they paid him. He doesn't have a lot of competition in terms of a wide receiver 1 on the team. You have Sterling Shepard, you have Slayton. The Giants, we tried that experiment. Clearly, there's a reason why they brought in Kenny Golladay. And I know they just signed, they just drafted Kadarius Toney. I think he'll also be used, but I think that Kenny Golladay is the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on the team. I'm not saying that he's going to finish the season as a wide receiver 1. I think he's most likely to finish as a wide receiver 2, like mid-range. I think that's most likely where he's going to end up in the season, but I have some confidence in him. I like him. And I normally like guys who are disrespected by other people, and I think that Kenny Golladay is one of those dudes. So he's somebody I believe that you should be targeting, whether it's dynasty redraft. I like him.
Yeah, and I think that Daniel Jones, plays to his strength. Daniel Jones is great with the deep ball, and that's what Kenny Golladay is best at getting. So I really like it as well. And then there's the report that just came out today, which you don't normally hear about a first-round rookie, where they said that they're going to have to ease Kadarius Toney into his role. They don't think that he's going to be somebody that you can just plug in for, a full starting spot week one immediately. So that's kind of shocking to hear, but that definitely elevates Kenny Galladay's stock for me a little bit. So I'm a huge fan of Kenny Golladay. I understand that he wanted to get paid, and I don't blame him for nursing that hip injury last year. Why would you want to go play for Detroit that, already made it clear that they were going to try to move on from Stafford, and, it was just kind of a mess there in Detroit. So I don't blame him for sitting out last year. I'm happy he got paid, $80 million. That gives him a lot of reason to go out there and really put his heart on the field. So yeah, I think Kenny Golladay is going to bounce back. We're going to flip over to this one. We got Jordan Bush asking, will Cleveland produce a weekly relevant wide receiver this season?
Absolutely. Absolutely. With Jarvis Landry and OBJ, here's the thing. A lot of people are hating on OBJ for unfairly to me, right? I think what happened was when he first went to Cleveland, I think everybody was expecting, a bona fide wide receiver one. And obviously that didn't happen. And last year he got hurt. So I just think that he's being unfairly disrespected. He's somebody also that you can get at such a value. He's still one of the most talented wide receivers in the league. He's I think 28 years old or something like that. So to me, I think and then Jarvis Landry, he's always a wide receiver that gets disrespected, especially, in PPR leagues, which most of us play in. He's consistently targeted. That's the thing is Jarvis Landry isn't sexy, but he's reliable. So it depends on what your definition of weekly, relevance is. I believe that Jarvis Landry is always relevant. OBJ is definitely going to be relevant. I'm not saying they're going to have the boom weeks that we expect from other receivers, but weekly relevance, absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes I think that the hate just gets a little bit too far with players. And we see that all the time. Like Joe Mixon right now, he's getting just disrespected and pushed way down draft boards. And I feel like that kind of happened to Odell. Now, make no mistake, this is not the Odell that we know from his days with the New York Giants. When he was with the New York Giants, his 16-game pace was 170 targets, 107 receptions, 1,534 yards, and 13 touchdowns. I mean, those are Jerry Rice numbers. What he was doing in New York was absolutely incredible. Since he's come over to Cleveland, it's dropped down to 122 targets, 67 receptions, 942 yards, and 5 touchdowns, which compared to his previous numbers is extremely disappointing. But those aren't bad numbers. That's still high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. And people are treating this guy, he's like the 25, 30th wide receiver going off the board right now. So yeah, I think that he can produce a weekly relevant, or the Cleveland can produce a weekly relevant wide receiver. And, Kevin Stefanski likes to run the ball, make no doubt about it. We saw it in his time in Minnesota where they were running the ball like crazy with Dalvin Cook. But Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs were both still finishing as wide receiver ones. So even if they are running the ball, they could still open up more opportunities in the passing game. And I think that the Odell hate has just gone a little bit too far. Now, this is going to be a quick question here. We got Munson 1897 asking, which quarterback is going to walk away with the starting job in Denver? Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater?
Lock. I just think that, he's been with the system. He's familiar with it. I like Teddy. I just don't see him overtaking the starting job. So I'll just go Lock.
Yeah, and I'm in the opposite camp here, man. I'm going with Teddy Bridgewater.
Okay.
Teddy Bridgewater, it seems like he is impressing in camp right now. And I wanted Locke to be the guy because me, I'm a big Courtland Sutton fan, and I feel like we're just speculating right now. I don't have any ears right now inside the Denver Broncos camp telling me what's going on, so we're just speculating. And what I want to say right now is that I think that whoever wins this job, it's really going to affect who the premium wide receiver is going to be to have on this offense. I think if Drew Lock is the starter, Courtland Sutton is going to be a wide receiver 1 because Drew Lock has that, I'm just going to throw it downfield and let my guy make a play. And then on the opposite side, I think that if Teddy Bridgewater wins the job, I think it's great for Jerry Jeudy. I mean, we saw it last year where DJ Moore is the more athletic and the better wide receiver, and Teddy Bridgewater still favored Robbie Anderson. And they're already talking about it right now out of camp that the rapport that Teddy Bridgewater and Jerry Jeudy have formed has been great. So, as somebody who's kind of been the Courtland Sutton guy, hyping him up on Twitter and all that, I'm a little nervous that Bridgewater is going to run away with the job because I feel like Bridgewater is a safer quarterback. He's got a lower ADOT, and he's not going to be that just YOLO quarterback chucking the ball down the field and letting his guy make a play. So, I don't know exactly who it's going to be. I'd lean towards Bridgewater a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of highlight how I think this is going to affect the pass catchers there. Now we got Soda Popinski. You've probably seen this guy around on Twitter, and he's asking, would you keep? Obviously, he's in a keeper league, and between J.K. Dobbins in the 5th or CeeDee Lamb in the 7th, who would you like to keep?
I'll go CeeDee. I'll go CeeDee Lamb because you know what he has so much hype around him too. I feel like with Dak back, I think okay, CeeDee Love has been getting has been getting up there. Well, I think it's well deserved. He's extremely talented, and especially like a dynasty, like he could be. He's right now. He's like he's top 10 in terms of like dynasty wide receiver in terms of at least from what I'm gathering from other people's perception. Dobbins, I'm excited about Dobbins, but you have to pay up 2 rounds earlier for him. I think that's where I'm. That's the only reason I'm kind of fading it. So CeeDee Lamb in the 7th, I feel like it's really hard to pass up.
And I think this is a great question because personally for me, I had to think long and hard about this one, and I'm not going to say that you're wrong for saying CeeDee Lamb because I really thought about it. But for me personally, I would just go with J.K. Dobbins because J.K. Dobbins, I realize that he doesn't have the highest ceiling of any player out there in fantasy, especially running backs. Like realistically, his ceiling is probably that of a low end RB1, but I think his floor is like a middle RB2. Like I think you could just lock him in to be a top 20 running back. So if you know that you can get a guy in the 5th round that is almost guaranteed to be an RB2, I feel like you've got to take that. Where there's a little bit more volatility with CeeDee Lamb. We also know that wide receivers are a little bit deeper. You can get a solid wide receiver in the 7th round. I don't think you can get a good running back like J.K. Dobbins in the 5th round. So I think this is a tough question. And I'm sorry that Soda Popinski is in this situation because it's not an easy one to answer, but I wish we had more clarity for you. Troy's going with CeeDee Lamb. I'm going with J.K. Dobbins. So, whoever you like more, I guess that's between me and Troy, I should say, whoever you like more, that's the one that you can go with here. We got Dynasty Vipers. I think this one came from our buddy Matt over there who, Matt actually over at Dynasty Vipers, they just hosted Joe Bryant. And it was an amazing show. They've got this show called Behind the Grind where it's not really football talk. It's more just getting to know Joe a little bit, talking a little bit about the business. Definitely check it out on their YouTube. Joe did an awesome job on there. Couldn't recommend that show enough. But they're asking, would you rather draft Melvin Gordon or Juju Smith-Schuster? My guess is that this guy was looking at his board in the Scott Fish Bowl, deciding who to draft, and that's why he threw this question to us. But who would you take?
I'll take Juju. I'll take Juju for a couple different reasons. And I think Juju's the forgotten man a little bit on the Steelers, right? Everybody wants Deontay Johnson. Everybody wants Claypool. And here's the thing, like they're all around the same age, right? Like no one's like significantly older than the other, but I'm gonna go Juju. Like he still had a very solid season last year. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that just because of their infatuation with everybody else. And everyone knocks Juju for TikTok and not being a real bona fide wide receiver one. But I believe that Juju is going to have a very good season this upcoming year. I was surprised that he re-signed with the Steelers, but I think that benefits him. And the offensive line isn't great. I know they have Najee Harris, so they might run the ball a little bit better, a little bit more, but I think Juju's going to be more involved. Melvin Gordon, he's kind of trending down. Obviously, they just signed Javonte Williams. So there's talk, is Melvin Gordon going to be the RB1? Is it going to be Javonte? I'm in the camp where I think Melvin Gordon starts the season off as RB1, but by the end, it's going to be Javonte. But I'm going to go with Juju. I just think that he's being just a little disrespected.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I just tweeted something out a couple days ago where I said I didn't want anything to do with Juju, and it blew up. And I kind of feel bad because Juju, I feel like he's getting a little bit too disrespected now. But yeah, you called it out. The dude's only 24 years old. Like, why does it feel like Juju is like 29? Like, it feels like this guy has been in the league forever. I think it's because of all the drama with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger injuries. Like, this dude has been dragged through the ringer in his time in Detroit, but he's only been in the league for a few years. He's 24 years old. And he actually did finish as the highest scoring receiver last year. And a lot of people like to say that, why are we disrespecting Juju because of that? Well, Deontay Johnson was hurt last year. Chase Claypool didn't really come on until later on in the season. So I think that the writing is kind of on the wall for Juju to take that back seat and become the wide receiver 3 on this team. But much like the Cincinnati Bengals and the Dallas Cowboys, this is a team that's going to throw the ball a lot, and I think they could support 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers. I think one guy could be kind of a low-end wide receiver 1, and then you could have 2 other guys that finish as wide receiver 2s. So I'm with you. I'm going with Juju here. Melvin just scares me because Javonte Williams is good. And they traded up to get him, and that worries me a little bit. I've heard some people say that Melvin Gordon might not even make it out of training camp without getting cut. If that's the case, he might land in a better situation. Maybe he goes to Atlanta, or, maybe he goes to Miami, maybe he goes to Buffalo, maybe he goes to somewhere that could help him out right now. But, I'm not too crazy about Melvin Gordon and his current situation, so I would definitely lean towards Juju here. We got Shane, FF Shane B, asking, who are some good draft targets after the 12th round in Scott Fishbowl? So this is a 12-team tournament. After the 12th round, we're looking deep, man. Outside of the top 40, who are you taking?
Oh, I guess any position. So I think any position, this is where you're going to be looking at. I kind of mentioned earlier, you can look at some kickers, right? I mean, like, I know a lot of people, kind of poo-pooing kickers, but after the 12th round, also late tight ends like Blake Jarwin. I mentioned him earlier. Like Blake Jarwin should be there, a tight end that I think could, really surprise a lot of people late. You have people like, I'm thinking like someone like Tyler Higbee. Everyone is down on Tyler Higbee from last year because the year before, those games where he had like the historic run of, 100 yards for like 4 games in a row or something like that. And last year he flopped. This year with Stafford, he's a tight end where you could take your shot on. So for me, with the tight end premium scoring, I'm trying to take my shot on late tight ends that are going to be hanging around that nobody wants. I think you do that. Kickers and people besides that. I mean, you have someone like, I think like Kadarius Toney, he might be there. I know you just talked about, the negative trading camp stuff, but there's a reason why they drafted him in the first round. He's somebody that I'm excited about. And I think that once he comes on, he's electric. So that's just another name of a wide receiver that, just a couple guys that I'm feeling in that area.
Man, I don't even want to answer this right now because we are in the middle of the 13th round, and I don't want my the people in my division to hear this. But I'll throw out one name out there, and this is a guy that I've been targeting in best ball leagues, and I'm, hopefully if he makes it to me, I'll take him here as well. But Allen Lazard is a guy that is getting a lot of disrespect, and he had to have abdominal surgery in the middle of the year. Like, that's not something that you just bounce back from and come back playing at an elite level. But this guy's big. He's not that fast, but he's big, he's strong, he can get downfield, he can make these contested jump balls. And the thing is, if Aaron Rodgers is going to stay there, somebody else is going to have to step up as the number 2. Maybe it's going to be Robert Tonyan, maybe it's going to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, maybe it's going to be Amari Rodgers. I do really like Amari Rodgers and his skill set with this team, but Allen Lazard is a guy that I just haven't really been able to quit since he got drafted in the league. Hasn't really been able to put it together over a full season yet. But give me Allen Lazard late in the league, and let's move to the next question before some of my division league mates tune into this one. We got Levi Chappelle asking us, and we already talked about OBJ a little bit, so this question just feels disrespectful to me. But Cole Beasley or Odell Beckham Jr., who are you drafting?
I'm picking OBJ, but I'll mention Cole Beasley, right? So Cole Beasley, he was very productive last year. I don't have his rank in front of me right now, but he was very productive last year. He was heavily targeted. He was the wide receiver 2 on his team. Josh Allen relied on him a lot, and he helped me win some playoff games. I'm not going to lie. Cole Beasley did his thing last year. However, as I mentioned before, OBJ is still one of the best wide receivers in the league. Yes, I know the Browns are more run heavy. Yes, I know that he wasn't that great, the last time we saw him with Baker, but it's a different team now. I believe that because they're so efficient with the run game, Baker looked so much better last year with that offensive system than he did any other year that he's been in the league. So I just think OBJ is going to be a benefactor of that. So I'm not saying OBJ is going to be wide receiver 1, but I think he'll be finishing better than Cole Beasley. And, you got Emmanuel Sanders there, and I think Gabe Davis is still going to do his thing. So I don't think Cole Beasley is just going to get all the targets. So give me OBJ.
Yeah, man, this question, this just kind of talks about what we were saying earlier, that like the OBJ disrespect has gone too far. Like, why are we putting Odell Beckham Jr., a 28-year-old, just a superstar 2 years ago? Why are we putting this man in the same conversation as an old, washed up guy? Not old and washed up, but what is Cole Beasley now? 31, 32 years old? Like, he's getting up there in age. No, this is Odell Beckham by a landslide. All right, let's move to the next one here. And after this, we only have one more question. So keep dropping those questions in the chat box, and Troy and I are going to get to them in just a few minutes. We got Johnny Hiltz asking us via email, should I keep Lamar Jackson or Darren Waller over Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, or Mike Davis?
Okay, so we don't know if this is super flex.
I don't know if you saw this whole email, but he said that what they're allowed is 3 keepers. And he said that he had this huge positional advantage by drafting Lamar Jackson and Darren Waller late last year. And he said that he prefers to keep running backs and wide receivers, but he's wondering if it, is worth using two of his keeper spots to lock in those guys again over some of the wide receivers and running backs that he's kept formerly.
Yes, it is worth it. Kind of like you were saying, Dave, about why you like in your strategy in redraft, you want a top 5 guy. Lamar Jackson's a difference maker, right? He's his, I guess, obviously the code everybody likes to say, Konami code, his rushing ability just makes him so different and so valuable. So to me, give me Lamar Jackson and Darren Waller. We all know that the tight end position, for the most part, is very unpredictable. And when you have a sure thing at tight end, you want to take advantage of that, right? And Darren Waller is top 3 at worst in terms of tight ends this year. I have him as 2. Some people have him, 3. No one has him as 1. No one should have him as 1. Kelsey's still the man. But having that advantage at tight end, to me, is so much more advantageous than Julio Jones, Odell, or Mike Davis. So, yes, keep Lamar Jackson, keep Darren Waller.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. The guy that if you're keeping 2 and you got to kind of get rid of 1, I think Julio is the guy that you should still keep as well. So if you can go into your league keeping Lamar Jackson, Darren Waller, and Julio Jones, that's a nice setup right there. So that's what I'd be doing. Man, a lot of Odell talk today. Everybody seems to be talking about Odell for some reason. We got 3 questions about Odell here. But I would cut Odell in this case, and Mike Davis. He's certainly got a high ceiling if he ends up taking on the Derrick Henry role in an Arthur Smith offense, but I don't see that realistically happening. First of all, I think that they're probably going to end up bringing in a veteran at some point. I don't know if it's going to be, Duke Johnson or Adrian Peterson, but I'd be shocked if they go into the week 1 with Mike Davis as their lead back. So Mike Davis is somebody that I'm kind of pumping the brakes on a little bit just for that reason alone. But the positional advantage that you're going to get with Lamar Jackson and Darren Waller is out of this world. I mean, Darren Waller is just a stud. I don't know how else to say it. I think he's like the only guy who's a tight end and is the number 1 option on his offense. You look at it last year, he was averaging 10.7 points per game in standard scoring. Him and Travis Kelce were the only people that averaged double digits in standard scoring. And that's going to be the same story again this year. He's a yak monster, yards after the catch for anyone that isn't familiar with that phrase. He's a beast. I don't know who it was. I saw somebody on Twitter the other day. They put together a little just this video where it was all of Darren Waller's catches of 15 yards or more. It's like a 5-minute video just from last year. Like this guy, he just makes chunk play after chunk play after chunk play. Absolute stud. And people were fading him last year because they thought 2019 was a fluke. Well, guess what? He's done it back-to-back years now. It isn't a fluke. Darren Waller is the real deal. And we got one last question that I'm going to pull up here from our friend Bo McBigtime, and he's asking, why does Dave's SFB11 strategy look so sexy? And I just want to call this out for a second. Obviously, Troy, that I love zero wide receiver. It's something that I like to talk to a lot of people about. And go check out my pinned tweet on my Twitter if you want to read a little bit about that. I just went hard after running backs early on in this draft. And then as you get a little bit later this year, you'll see how deep wide receivers are. It's unbelievable that in the 12th round, you can get guys like Michael Pittman, who can very well, lead their team in targets. And you can get guys like Antonio Brown in the 10th and 11th round where, he can realistically put up numbers similar to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So check out that article if you're interested in reading a little bit about it. Thanks for dealing with that, Troy. I had to give myself a shameless plug there.
It's no problem.
Before we open this up to the chats, I just want to call out one more thing real quickly, that you need to sign up for the Football Guys daily email update if you aren't already. Every day, Joe Bryant will bring you all of the latest from Football Guys. So not only is it just the content that we're producing, you'll get to see all the videos, all the articles, all the collaboration pieces that we do. All of that will be on there. But as well as that, we also have the news wire that's going to give you all the news, transactions, rumors, and everything else going on in the NFL. Before I ever even worked with Football Guys, I've been on this newsletter since high school, and it gets sent out every evening. You get to wake up in the morning, and it's just, a couple news pieces with Joe's take on what's going on in the NFL. It's a great thing to sign up for. So go to footballguys.com if you're not already on that newsletter, and make sure that you become a part of that. All right, now here's the fun part where I get to scroll through the chat and try to find questions between everything else that we got in here. The first question, of course, is any Jarwin love in here, which we did discuss. But let's go to this one because this one is a Dolphins question, Troy. So where do you guys see Jalen Waddle drafted at? I don't know if you've done many drafts or mocks or what, but where would you kind of be comfortable taking Jalen Waddle this year in a draft? I know you're a big fan of him, so where would you like to see him get drafted?
Sure, yeah. Shout out to my boy Hassan. And in terms of where do I see him being drafted? So I see he's been drafted like, depending on how your setup is. I would say like eighth, ninth round, if I'm just guessing on the top of my head in terms of where he's drafted. But I think he's going a little bit too high, personally. In terms of redraft leagues, so if we're talking like dynasty or anything like that, I think he's valued properly. But for year one, I want him to, do really well. I believe that, he obviously has some rapport with Tua. I just don't think he makes an immediate impact. I think that, he's going to be flashy. He's going to make plays, but I don't see him being like a heavily targeted guy in the offense. I just don't believe that anyone is going to be heavily targeted more than anyone else, right? I think it's going to be fairly even between him, Parker, Fuller. I mean, the targets will be different, but I think they'll be fairly even. So I think he's probably going like, eighth, ninth round, somewhere around there. But I say maybe towards the end of the season, he'll be good, but just, temper your expectations. I love Waddle. If you're expecting like huge numbers from him early on, then I think you might be disappointed.
Yeah, that's a pretty crowded room of pass catchers there. So I'm with you. It's kind of tough to want to draft him. I think that there's really only, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, there's really only like three rookie wide receivers that I'm really interested in this year. And that's Devonta Smith, because I think that he's in a position where he can see a massive target share right off the bat. We saw what he did in college, just an absolute dominant athlete, and people get worried about his breakout age and his weight and whatever, but the dude's just a baller. And I think that he is going to instantly become the wide receiver one on that Eagles team because, Jalen Rager, he's not it. J-Jaw, he's not it. Dallas Goedert, he's going to see a decent chunk, but I think that Devonta Smith instantly becomes the wide receiver one on that team. Rashad Bateman, who I'm not going to talk about too much because we talked about him a little bit earlier, he's a guy that you should definitely be looking after. And then the other guy for me is Amari Rodgers. I already called out Alan Lazard as being a late round pickup. But Amari Rodgers, his comp was Randall Cobb when he was coming out of the league. So just, I get excited hearing that a Randall Cobb type player is getting drafted to the Packers. So those are really the only guys I'm worried at or like, looking at. And I agree with you. I think Jalen Waddle's going just a little bit too high. So we got another question here from YouTube from Joe King. What are the odds that Justin Herbert finishes as the QB1? Let's do this like on 100%, like, 100%, 1%. Where are you at?
Okay, one, Joe, you have a fantastic last name. And in terms of finishes as a QB1 overall or just a QB1, right? So if it's a QB1, then I think he has 90% chance. I'm very confident that he finishes as a QB1 after what we've seen last year. This year, he has a much, much improved offensive line. Hopefully, Mike Williams stays healthy and he doesn't land awkwardly like he always does catching the ball. So he has him. He has Keenan Allen. Austin Eckler. We're hoping Austin Eckler has a fully healthy season. So I think he has a 90% chance of finishing as a QB1.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the guy already finishes a QB1, and you got to imagine that he's going to take a step forward this year. A low-key signing that a lot of people aren't really talking about is Jared Cook. I've loved Jared Cook, man. He got off to kind of a slow start in his career, but over the last few years, whether it was his final year in St. Louis, whether it was it Green Bay,
Raiders,
Saints, the Raiders, he's been all over the place, and he's just done well everywhere he's played. He's a touchdown catching machine, so I love that. I think that's going to help give him a really, really good red zone target. So I'm with you, like 95% chance that he finishes as a QB1. If the question is, can he finish as the QB1? I mean, we saw it for like a brief stretch last year as a rookie. I don't expect him to regress. So I'd say that there's even, like a 1 in 10 chance that he could finish as the QB1. I'm not putting him in that top 5 tier that we talked about earlier, but he's got just as good of a chance as, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, anybody in that second tier. He's got just as good of a chance as finishing as the QB1 as any of those guys. So, Justin Herbert, I don't quite have him in that elite tier, but he's like just a smidge behind those guys that we were talking about earlier. And we got Taco again, who we got him a little bit earlier with his question, but he's asking us live in the chat here. And I don't know if you pay attention to defenses all that much, but he's asking, how do you feel about the Browns and Vikings defense And is there a sleeper defense that is not in the top 5? So just, while you're thinking about this a little bit, I'll let you know, according to the Football Guys rankings, here is our top 5 through the consensus: the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Washington Football Team. That is our top 5. Do you have a guy, or I'm sorry, a team outside of that top 5 that you'd kind of be targeting in a team or in a league that has defense and special teams?
Yeah, but it's gonna sound like a homer pick. Dolphins.
Let's go.
Dolphins were, third, I think, in turnover defense last year. And we saw like they were turnover machines. They were excellent. So for me, that's my sleeper defense. In terms of these two, I like the Browns. They have Myles Garrett. They just signed Jadeveon Clowney. So I'm not a huge IDP guy, so I wouldn't be able to, advise there. But overall, in terms of just overall defense, I like the Browns. I'm going to be nervous to, whoever I have starting against them. I'm going to be a little bit worried, depending on who it is. If he's not an elite guy, I might, second guess if I have another option if I'm going against them. So I think the Browns are going to be legit.
Yeah, no, I like the Browns a lot. I agree with you on Miami. I think like the chalkiest pick, like outside of the top 5, is just going to be the Ravens, but we've got them slotted into 6. So if you're looking for more of a sleeper, I mean, I can give the homer pick too. I think that the Bears, for whatever reason, are just so underrated. They've got them at 15 right now, and I think that they deserve to be in at least the top 10 conversation. But I'll go a little bit deeper here. The Chargers are a team that I really, really like. They have so many playmakers on defense. Obviously, we know about Joey Bosa, but they've got some other guys out there. Chris Harris Jr., who still plays that lockdown corner role. Derwin James. They're a team that I think is still pretty underrated. And then for whatever reason, I feel like my entire life, they just always have a good special teams unit. Like they're always able to score on special teams, whether it be punt blocks or whatever. So the Chargers would be my kind of deep sleeper pick if you're looking for that. Now, we got a bunch of friends tuned in today. We got Jorge Martin in the chat too. Thanks a lot for tuning in as always. And he's asking, with Nick Chubb looking like a top 5 running back, what is Kareem Hunt's upside this year? And then he wants to shout out that he just got him as the running back 15 in SFB. What do you think Kareem Hunt's upside is?
Sure. I think his upside is running back 1. I mean, the running back 2. I think he falls into that range. I mean, I think that his ceiling is going to be capped with Nick Chubb, right? I think Nick Chubb is going to get the lion's share of the carries, but we understand that Kareem Hunt's going to be targeted, on third downs, and he's going to be split out wide. So they'll utilize him, but I don't see him being anything more than a running back 2. I say, if we're being very, very optimistic, high end, but I don't see that happening. I think his ceiling is going to be mid-range RB2.
It's kind of weird last year that he actually scored less points per game when Nick Chubb was out than he did when Nick Chubb was in. I think that he's just better when he can keep his legs a little bit fresher and, take on that passing down role. He was getting more volume, but he was less efficient with that volume. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's whether he plays or not, I think Kareem Hunt's kind of just locked in as like a middling RB2. We got Soda Popinski in here asking us. He was the one that had the question about CeeDee Lamb or J.K. Dobbins, and he said, "Yeah, you didn't help. You guys repeated my thoughts, leaning Lamb and going running backs early." I'm sorry, man. That was a tough question. I wouldn't like to be in your shoes, but thank you for submitting the question. But we got another live one here, and this is another Jalen Waddle question, man. Today, this is the Odell Beckham Jr. and Jalen Waddle show brought to you by Football Guys. Is Jalen Waddle going to outpace Will Fuller this year, or do you think Parker will be the wide receiver 1 in Miami? Troy, you and I just did a show together a few days ago, and we had this exact conversation, so let's do it again.
Of course. I believe that Parker has a chance to be the wide receiver 1 on the team. And I've mentioned, and some people are going to think I'm crazy because obviously the ADP doesn't reflect that. Last year, he didn't have a good season. But if we really think about last year, he was dealing with when he had no other wide receiver support. He was the only wide receiver. Him and Mikey G, with Mike Gesicki, were the only really receiving options, right? So in terms of coverage, it was all on him. And he also was dealing with injuries, right? The offense in general just wasn't great last year. So, and after his, the year before when he had a breakout year, people are super down on him and nobody wants Parker. But I see him as being the possession receiver in this offense. I mentioned earlier that I don't think anyone's going to get heavily targeted, but I do like that his role is going to most likely be that, because obviously having Fuller and Waddle are only going to help Parker, with probably lesser coverage, because more coverage is going to probably be on Fuller and Waddle. People are going to be worried about him. People are going to be game planning for him. So I can see that Parker, surprising people and possibly, finishing the season as the wide receiver one. Now, he's not exciting as Will Fuller and Waddle. I think Waddle is going to be more of that short yardage wide receiver that's going to be a yak monster. It's going to yards after catch, or he has the ability, go long and he can make big plays. So that's going to be his role. Will Fuller, we've seen him with like Deshaun Watson. He's always going down deep and making touchdowns. I believe that the Dolphins are going to want to use him similarly, maybe different places of the field. But I'll say that I think that Will Fuller outpaces Waddle, though. I mean, maybe later in the year, Waddle might do his thing, but I think Will Fuller outscores Waddle.
Now, you're the Miami guy, so I feel bad going against what you're saying here. But I think that Waddle does outpace Will Fuller because I think that Will Fuller, I think he's going to be used a little bit more as a decoy on this team. I don't see Tua throwing those balls 45, 50 yards down the field like we saw Deshaun Watson do. But I do wholeheartedly agree with you that I think Devontae Parker is still the wide receiver one on this team. It's easy to get excited about the shiny new toys, but Devontae Parker, man, former first rounder. We've seen him put together some great stretches. What was it? In the back half of that year with Ryan Fitzpatrick, he was like the wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 7. It was something like that. But Devontae Parker, he's a very good guy, and like you said, he's that possession receiver. And I made myself laugh a little bit here because I said you and I were on a show talking about this the other day, and I just realized that I wasn't on that show. That was just me listening to your show with Andy Behrens talking about this. So we talk a lot. We listen to each other's shows. Sometimes we get a little bit confused. Now we got somebody else asking us, and there's going to be a lot of Scott Fishbowl questions in here today with that just taking over the industry for this week. But somebody asked us here, Spire Cakes, what are your thoughts on taking both Cam Newton and Mac Jones in SFB? What do you think, Troy? Would you take both of those guys?
You're playing it safe. I think that depending on who your other quarterbacks are, it's not the worst strategy in the world. I think it's fine. So you're guaranteed, okay, you're guaranteed the starter of New England Patriots, right? But how much upside is there? So for me, if it happens to be Cam, if we have a healthy Cam, we've seen that he could be very productive, not necessarily throwing the ball, but with his legs, and on the goal line, he's the RB1. So in that way, Cam has a lot of upside. Mac Jones, I'm not extremely excited about him just in general. He's probably going to be safer in this format because he's an accurate passer. And we know that in SFB, you get deductions for incompletions and you get deductions for interceptions. So that's going to hurt against Cam, right? So that hurts Cam in playing him, but he has the rushing upsides and maybe make up for it. Mac Jones doesn't have the rushing, but he could be accurate. But I don't think any of these guys, I think they should be your QB3 at highest. Like, you don't want any of them to be a QB2. That you'll be in trouble. But I think it's fine. But it's just safe, because you get the starter, you get a quarterback. But it's not an exciting acquisition of either of them. But it's fine. That's how I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't really want either of these guys if I'm being honest. And I feel like so many people in super flex leagues, for anyone listening to the show that isn't familiar with super flex, that means that you got a flex position that you can plug a quarterback into. So rather than just a running back, wide receiver, or tight end, you can put a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, or tight end in that position. What that does in drafts is it grossly inflates the value of quarterbacks, because if you get a chance to play two quarterbacks, that's just such a huge advantage than having to play, somebody else in that flex spot. So what happens is you see typically, in the first round out of the first 12 picks, it's usually like 8 to 9 of those players are quarterbacks, and everybody hits their quarterbacks early. But I think what happens is people get trapped into the idea of like, I need as many quarterbacks on my team as possible, without realizing that, you don't just need any warm body quarterback to plug into that super flex spot. You still want it to be a good quarterback, because realistically, there's wide receivers that are going to go out there and outscore Cam Newton, and there's running backs out there that are going to go out and outscore Mac Jones. So, I feel like people get a little too carried away with with people taking quarterbacks. You see Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold and these guys getting drafted in like the 5th, 6th round. And I just think that's, that's not my personal strategy. I'm okay reaching for the elite guys early, but I'm not going to spend a 5th or 6th round pick on a bad quarterback just for the sake of having an extra quarterback. And I feel like that's what I see a lot of people do. So, like I said, we got a lot of SFB questions coming in, and here's another one. Did anyone see Scott Fish's team? So Scott Fish, obviously the founder and creator of the Scott Fish Bowl, he said he took 3 tight ends and 3 quarterbacks in the first 8 or 9 rounds. He set up the scoring, so I'm thinking that might be a good strategy. Troy, what would you think? I mean, so let me explain the rules real quickly. We hit on this a little bit. You get deducted points for every incomplete pass. You get -4 points for every interception. And then the reason tight ends are so valuable, this is a tight end premium league. So it's a half-point PPR league for any position, but every time a tight end catches a catch, anytime a tight end catches a reception, instead of half a point, it is a full point. So you get a little bit extra points for tight end production here. And Scott took 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends in the first few rounds. What do you think? Is that a strategy you would implore?
So I have 3 quarterbacks. I think I'm through 10 rounds or something like that. But I was so surprised how a lot of people only had 2 quarterbacks or only had 1 quarterback, and they're waiting like super long. And it's funny that you mentioned, right? You mentioned how you don't just want any warm body as a quarterback, or as your like second quarterback, whatever. And I think a lot of people are trying to use that strategy in Scott Fish. And I think that's like the worst decision to do in this particular format, because you get deducted for incompletions and interceptions and sacks. So for me, I'm avoiding so many guys. Like personally, like I don't really want that many rookies, because rookies do all those things, as well as I don't want any bad quarterbacks. So for me, for example, I have Justin Herbert. I have Derek Carr. Derek Carr isn't sexy, but he is accurate, and even his O-line isn't great, but he doesn't throw many interceptions and he's accurate. And I got Carson Wentz. Yeah, he was an interception machine last year, but his offensive line is extremely improved. So I understand Scott. I had the similar strategy with quarterbacks. I only have 1 tight end, which is George Kittle, but to me, I want the advantage of having an elite tight end. So I get it. I don't know when I'm going to get my other tight ends, but I like that strategy.
Yeah, it's not something I would do personally. I'm all for loading up on tight ends, and I missed out on the early tight ends. But then in the mid rounds, I picked up Noah Fan, I picked up Johnny Smith, and I'm probably not done taking tight ends, because you can still put those guys in your flex to get those extra points. So if you've got tight ends that are moving the chains and seeing some volume, I think it makes sense to kind of load up on those guys. But I'm not trying to put somebody in there that can negatively affect me. You put somebody like Cam in, and he has a game where he goes, 8 for 18 and throws 3 picks. You're looking at like -10 points, and you don't want that in your roster. So I'm avoiding those types of quarterbacks. We got one more question here, and Bo, man, he's just flaming me today. He's just trying to get under my skin a little bit. He said, Bo is projecting, I believe, 800, 900 yards for Kyle Pitts this year. Bo also makes fun of the fact that I like to put mayonnaise on everything. So he says, when Kyle Pitts is a tight end 3 this season, how long will Dave go without mayo as a punishment? I'll flip it up on you, Bo. If Kyle Pitts finishes as top 3 tight end this season, I will eat 3 tablespoons of mayonnaise live on a show. How about that? All right. Well, that's enough. No, I don't want to see it either, but that's how confident I am that Kyle Pitts will not finish as a top 3 tight end. Like I said earlier in the show, if you're watching this, you're probably a pretty serious fantasy player. And what you need to do is go to footballguys.com to get yourself a premium Football Guys membership. Whether you're playing redraft, dynasty, or DFS, we have got you covered. Go to footballguys.com. Click on the orange button in the top right corner to sign up. We will do all of the work for you while you do the winning. Thank you so much for tuning into Football Guys' newest show. It is just Dave and Troy here today, but we will be back at you next week with Victoria all over again. Every Wednesday at 7:30. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Periscope. Be sure to subscribe to the Football Guys YouTube page of youtube.com/footballguystv, where you could see all of the rest of our wonderful shows. Troy, do you have anything to add to this one?
Nah, man, just appreciate everybody tuned into the, listening now, everyone in the chat. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you submit those questions to mailbag@footballguys.com. We appreciate you.
Yes, sir. We will see you next week.